It's free. You just go in, you sign in, you create your own little room. I use this with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders quite a bit. We practice our grammar on today's meet because as soon as you post something, if anybody's bold enough to do that, everybody can see it in the classroom. We work on doing things like capital letters at the beginning of a sentence and punctuation at the end and all correct spelling because then everybody in the class can see it all at the same time. So, but if you want to go ahead and check out that site, I'll pop back over here.
So if you're using this with your 4th and 5th graders, are they using a computer or are they using how are they
iPads or computers, either one.
So they all have iPads in your classroom?
I have a set. Yeah. So when our computers are all being used for testing, which happens 3 times a year, and I have no computers for 3 weeks at a time, we bring out the iPads and we do all this stuff on the iPads. So let me resize this since that's a little funny looking. There we go. All right, so we've got a couple more. Do we have enough seats? Is that everybody? For the video, holler at me. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. So I'm going to go. Do you want to sit here? Come on in. There's a seat up here. One over here. All right, so if you've had a chance, there's today's meet site. That's the address of the Prezi that you're going to see today. We may gloss over a couple things if we start running short on time. So if you want to go ahead and write down that Prezi address, it's tinyurl.com, Bloomin Core. And then if we have time, I'd like to do a little brainstorming. We'll be doing that using Wall Wisher, which is back up and functional. So if you tried Wall Wisher at any time in the last few years and noticed it was up, down, up, down, up, it seems to be up for quite a while now, which is very healthy. So we'll play with that as well. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get this started. My name is Tamara Meredith. I work for the school district as a K-5 librarian. I get to play with little kids. It's awesome. Okay. I also teach undergraduate music history at the university, and I teach graduate bibliographic research for our music grad students. So I get little short people and lots of tall people, and teaching them is not so different. Okay, so I have a lot of fun with this because I get to do everything from introduce them to a computer to guide them through high-level research, help edit thesis, dissertation sorts of topics. What we're going to talk about today really impacts every possible spectrum of the educational scale. And I would love to tell you that you're going to see all sorts of cool tools like you just did upstairs, but I'm afraid in this case, you saw all the cool fish that people want to give you, now you get to learn how to fish. So this is a little more on the how end than just the fish. So think of all the fish you just saw, and then we'll relate them to what you're going to see here. Okay? So this is directly tying in Bloom's taxonomy, specifically the digital side of the taxonomy, with the upcoming Common Core and the currently in place, going into place Common Core that's coming down the line. In my role as a school librarian, one of my jobs is to constantly be looking for ways to support my teachers in the classroom with resources, whether that's a digital resource or a new tech tool or new content. I'm constantly scouting and I'm looking around out there. For me, as a learner, starting in 1st grade, I was taught Bloom's. Okay? So, to me, this is what makes sense. Right there. I saw this on the wall from 1st grade through 8th grade. Everybody else has seen it at some point, right? Yeah, okay, everybody knows this one. You have to learn everything first, then you gotta understand it, then you get to play with it a little bit, then you gotta take it apart, then you gotta make your own cool stuff, and then you gotta sit back and think about it for a while, right? That's the way I learned, that's the way a lot of our students in the past have learned. It's the way our college ed students sometimes learn as well, because we talk about these sorts of processes. This was Dr. Benjamin Bloom, University of Chicago, 1956. This whole process for developing the cognitive domain actually started late 30s, early 40s, University of Chicago. It was not designed as a K-12 instructional practice. It was designed as a higher ed assessment tool. Okay? So, this is a wonderful thing. We've all used it. All of education uses it, but there are some things that have changed over the years. 2001, we get a revision to that one. Now, for me, I spent 95 through 2004 in musicology. I didn't see the revision until I got back out of academia and got back into schools and other areas, and I came out with, whoa, it's different now. It's completely changed. We now have verbs, right? We are now active all the time when we're doing this. And we reversed that creation and evaluation stage. Okay? So we're now saying that the pinnacle of education is creating, which I love. That's awesome, right? So the most important thing you can do, the pinnacle of education and learning, is that creating piece. So just as a simple graphic over here just shows you that switch, how things have changed. So we remember, we understand, we apply, we analyze, we evaluate, and then we create. Lovely theory, right? Makes a little more sense, especially in today's digital world. But that whole idea that we've got some sort of hierarchical step-by-step structure really doesn't always work. Okay? That's not how our education system works. If it did, everybody would have PhDs and make $1 million a year, because we just learn all this stuff and then slowly get better. Okay? So, here's another idea that's come on since 2001. It's all round. It's all just as important as the next thing, right? Okay? So creating is important, but so is understanding, so is applying, and you don't have to start a new project at the bottom level, right? We're no longer talking about levels with Blooms. We're talking about different pieces of it, you know? So this is one example. This is just posted out of Smart Tutor, just one of their posters that they've got there. I've got a big one hanging in my room that I bought, of a blooming orange, okay, instead of a pyramid. And we'll see later that people have kind of taken off with this concept. So we've got an orange. Nothing's more important than the next, but you see all of these verbs involved that describe the different pieces. We also have this one, which right now is my personal favorite. And there are several different sites that have actually used this graphic. There's an argument over who started it first, so there's like 3 different resources right now that say who actually started this whole idea. Let's flip blooms. Let's make it a flipped blooms. Somebody called it an inverted one, and then we said, no, that really doesn't sound very nice. So let's call it flipped instead. That's much more catchy. The idea that the beginning of any process is actually the creation piece. Okay? Now, I work with K-5. I can tell you right now, my kids will learn a lot more if I start with that piece. Right? If I present them with a bunch of facts and figures, and I teach library, I'm sorry, but authors, illustrators, and parts of the book, they're entertaining, but you can only sing so many songs. Okay? If we make a book, or if we create something, and then we sit back and look at it and go, huh, what did we make? Let's take this apart, really see what we did here, right? Now we'll start taking all those pieces and putting them together. Okay, now I'm starting to actually understand what's there, and now I understand how to do it again. I can remember what I did. So in a lot of ways, just taking the whole concepts we've all learned and going, whoop, really works well. Now, I played with this at the elementary level. I haven't had a chance to play with it with my older kids, but I'm guessing it probably would work really well as well. It's just easier with little ones because they're not nearly as concerned about what people think of them. So when you hand them a whole bunch of string and glue and paper and say, go make something, they're like, cool, and off they go. It's harder to do with older kids sometimes. Although, I've had some very successful sessions with college students that involve little programmable robots and other things that they have just as much fun with those. So here's another concept. And then we also have the Bloomin' butterfly. Again, this is just another diagram. But you'll notice we've really moved away from that pyramid. We've really moved away from remembering, right? You have to know everything before we can understand it. Now, that is not to say that knowing facts is not important. It absolutely is, because you've got to know something before you start creating. You've got to have tools, and you've got to have some facts, and you've got to have other things. But what this is telling us is that we can get to all these different stages depending on what diverse backgrounds are. When we talk about differentiated instruction, how all of our kids, whether they're little ones or big ones, come from different backgrounds, starting at that creation point might tell us a lot about the kids before we start telling what they need to know. Right? Let them do some experimenting and figure out what they need to know. So we've got all these different ideas. This is all based off of Bloom's Revised from 2001. And then we get what I think is one of the coolest things in a very long time. Andrew Churches, Australian. A lot of cool things come out of New Zealand and Australia when it comes to this kind of stuff. Bloom's Digital Taxonomy, 2009, goes up on his website. He's been a big tech educator for ages. He's had this website, the Ed Origami at wikispaces.com, or wikispaces.org, excuse me. He's had all of these for quite some time, but now he takes all of Bloom's, and he's going to take all these tech tools that he's been using and teaching with and start assigning them to categories. How can we use them to support these different learning domains, these different cognitive domains? So, according to the author, and we'll look at his examples in a second, it's not restricted to just the cognitive domain. And what I mean by that is this. When Benjamin Bloom published his cognitive domain, when we get the Bloom's taxonomy in 1956, that's one of 3 that he was supposed to come up with, that the committee was working on in higher ed. Cognitive domain, affective domain was supposed to be the second one, which did get published, but gets very little citation. And then psychomotor. So the idea was the cognitive domain is everything going on in here. The affective domain, which we were supposed to discuss next in line of a piece of this, was how you feel about things, or how a professor makes their students feel about a subject, the emotions they elicit on a given topic. To me, in a K-12 setting, that's the engagement play factor, right? I'm all about the engagement play factor. That's totally how the kids feel about what you're telling them. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. If they like it and want to play with it, they're going to learn it, right? So you've got the affective, and then the psychomotor, which is, of course, the motor skills, the tactile skills. So what Churches is telling us is that, yeah, he's going to use Bloom's taxonomy. He's going to use the revised taxonomy to assign some, but he's not just saying it's just cognitive domain skills. He's actually taking into account the affective part, the play part, the engagement part, how you feel about it, and the psychomotor part. What can you actually do? What do you touch it? If you need to practice drawing the letter B, there's a great app for that. And if a kid gets to do this and they get a little woohoo clap at the end with it after they've drawn the letter B, they're more likely to do it this way again and not this way. That little bit of applause, woohoo, good job, makes a difference. Okay? So you can start anywhere, not just at the bottom. He makes that very clear in the preface. And if you're curious, when you go to that website, there is a way to actually print off his entire taxonomy. I've kind of carried this around a long time. It's a lot of pages, but you can print it off as a PDF. I still do the old school paper thing. So he's got all of this in kind of the introduction to his taxonomy. And he makes it very clear that this is not about the tools and the technologies. Rather, it's about using these to facilitate learning, which is what hopefully we're all thinking all the time, right? But we do get bogged down in all the cool stuff. It's really cool. I want to find a way to use this. But sometimes it's really hard to tie that into whatever your educational objective is. I really like using my story, but that's really hard to justify when we really need to practice fractions. I mean, we can find a way to do it, just it's a little challenging sometimes. Okay? So he's very focused on this digital taxonomy and how it's going to actually support the learning piece, not just here's a tool, plug it in and use it. So this is what his taxonomy looks like. And this is just an image that's right off his website. So he's got all your different domains here, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, all those. Good old lower order, right? The ones where we actually learn stuff, and the higher order where we put them all together. I was loving the presentation upstairs because so much of what she was talking about was the higher order piece. That creation, but not just creation, but like the blending of nonfiction and fiction and media and all this kind of stuff. That's extreme high order. That's awesome. That's what we want all our kids to aspire to. Okay, 5. We got a lot down here. But as we'll see, we can get them up there. And it's not necessarily that you have to start here. Again, start with that creation piece and then start taking it apart. So here's what he suggests. Lower order thinking skills. These are just typical verbs that we see. To remember things, recognizing, listing, describing, identifying, all those fun things. In the digital world, bullet pointing, highlighting, bookmarking, social networking, social bookmarking, local bookmarking, searching, Googling. All of these things count as digital tools that support remembering. Okay? So he's taking not just direct relationships, not just, oh, I saw it and I recognized it, but, okay, there's no way I'm going to remember 60 different links for the presentation that I'm giving right now. Okay? I am not going to write them down and organize them in a journal. I bookmark, right? And we would expect our kids to do the same thing, but that's a skill. Okay? Learning how to place a bookmark is a skill we have to teach. So that's a digital skill we want to think about anytime we're dealing with content or with a lesson at this level. Understanding, advanced searches, Boolean searches, blog journaling, twittering, categorizing, tagging. Love that one. We can do this with a lot of our library catalogs. Again, librarians, so I'm thinking library catalogs here. We can do book reviews, but we can also tag content, like on Amazon. And if a book is about, horses, because I've got tons of 5th grade girls who only want to read horse books, they could go in and find a book they like, and they could tag it as horse care, if it's all about how to take care of horses, something along those lines. The thing that separates it from just bookmarking, the tagging piece, is you have to understand the content in order to tag it correctly. You have to know this piece before you can do this. So even though we don't have to start at the bottom, you need pieces of that in the digital world in order to do some of these things. Commenting, annotating, the list goes up. He's also got some communication ideas along the side, you know. So texting back and forth, that's kind of a low order thing, you know. You can all do that, you can all text. Our kids can all do that. But when we get up higher, those higher orders of debating online, okay? Now that may come in the form of a text. You could debate through text, I've seen kids do it. But the whole concept of debating, of having an argument and justifying your position is a higher order skill. And there are tools that will let us do that. At the very top is the collaboration piece, right? Not just communicating, but actually working together in a creative process. And that's really what we want our kids to do. If we have time, there's a video I'd love to show you that to me is like the ultimate collaboration, ultimate creative piece by an ag major out of University of, I want to say Nebraska. It's like an ag major with a music minor. It's the most amazing video I've ever seen. I'll show you. Anyway, this is Andrew Church's idea. Okay? So here's what he's saying. I love it. This makes my life a lot easier. This is helping me think things through. But, as we saw, we like to give things images, right? So here's what we've come up with. Here's what Kathy Schrock has come up with, which is very helpful. So we see things that have been outlined. So we've got Google Apps to support Bloom's revised taxonomy. So she's gone through and she's assigned all of these different Google Apps by different levels. Remembering, understanding. So if you want to analyze and you want to use a Google tool, you've got Google Moderator, Google Groups, Google Sites. Talks out there. There's a few of these that have gone away, even since she posted them. Okay? So this is a wonderful thing. It's kind of like, as I was listening to the presentation upstairs, I love it. It's just so much. How am I going to remember it all? Right? So somebody's done some organizing for us. We've also got iPad apps organized similarly. Again, limited number, but they all do the same types of jobs as we're going up from lower order to higher order, or starting anywhere as we go. The problem with this setup, and this isn't to belittle anybody who's done this type of work because it's very difficult and time intensive, is that the day you post it, one of these goes away. Or the icon changes. Or they run an update, and suddenly it doesn't do the same thing anymore. So these are great, and I think these references are wonderful, but I know for me personally and for a lot of the people I talk to, it's less about finding these and more about knowing how to match up the type of tool to the content that you need to teach, and the end result, and the assessment piece that you need out of it, right? So these are wonderful. One of my favorites still, the Bloomin' Peacock. So Kelly Tankley has gone through, and we had a Bloomin' Peacock here. In fact, now she's got flowers. In fact, as of yesterday, she posted 2 new things on her site. She's got a flower and something else now as well. So you can have a Bloomin' Peacock. You know, kids love that one. That's a pretty cool one right there. And then you've also got, let's see if I can get it over here. It's a little harder to see, a little too small. There are 2 professors in Adelaide University, again, Stroid, Ian Green and Alan Carrington, who are going around teaching pedagogy workshops, all based in teaching with iPads. So this is one of their constructs that they've come up with. So this is each of our different domains, except we put remember and understand together in this one, but then they've got all these different iPad apps assigned. So if you ever see a session for pedagogy, they actually meant to spell it that way, probably, because these guys are actually teaching pedagogy workshops. So where does that leave us with this? Again, for me as a Bloom's kid and somebody who's done this, this has always been my thought. The whole Bloom's digital thing, in a lot of ways, makes my life easier. Okay? So this is the way I think through things. What level is it at? What are we trying to get out of it? How can I support that? What tools am I looking for? And in the last couple of years, as I've moved from various library spots into a K-5 environment, we have something new. We're going to pass over that one. Go back. Grab your eyes. It'll be there. I'm going to jump on it. Back to that. We have the Common Core. Right? So how many of you consider yourselves Common Core experts? How many of you have had some sort of training or discussion or a presentation or something about Common Core? Okay, so some folks in here have. I had 0 up until about 1.5 years ago. And my concern as a librarian is always, okay, I get it. How am I going to support my teachers? Because this is obviously something new and different, and I'm going to need new tools, or I'm going to need a different way of thinking in order to, get them the stuff they need, whether it's books, or digital resources, or some sort of cool tool to support, whatever they're doing in the classroom. So, since lots of folks in here haven't got a background in Common Core, we're not going to go through each of these. There's about 7 slides here. This is actually taken directly from, this is on the Common Core website, from a 2010 webinar that was put together by the folks that put together the Common Core. Just a little bit about it, what it's designed for, because I know there are very mixed emotions about it. There always are. There are those who go, yay, we're finally going to all have the same thing, and those that I teach just fine. And somewhere in the middle is probably where the truth is, right? So this is the way it's been presented to us, and this is the way I'd like us to think about it today, because it will help us go through the process of selecting appropriate tools using Bloom's Digital Taxonomy. So this was the process they used. The whole point behind Common Core is not necessarily to standardize education in every state. It's to make sure our kids are college and career ready when they graduate high school. That's the big picture, okay? We don't want to make sure, it's not teaching to the lowest common denominator, it's not making sure every kid gets a degree. It's making sure that when they hit age 18 or whatever it is where they're out of high school, that they are either college or career ready, that they have the skills they need. Okay. Developed in summer 2009, it's not been around for very long. Based on readiness standards, K-12 learning progressions were developed, multiple rounds of feedback, teachers, researchers, higher education, general public. It's gone through the ringer. I mean, there have been a lot of studies. I've gone through several of them. A lot of them all say the same thing. You're either with it or you're against it. You have both sides going on at any given time. Final standards were released in 2010. That's where this presentation is from. What are they? College and work expectations. We want to make sure by the time they graduate, if this is where we want them to be, we go this way and make sure that when they come to school the very first time, this is the progression. This is where we need to get them. This is how we think we need to get them there. It doesn't tell you every grade what you have to teach. It doesn't tell you what you need to teach in every subject. In fact, it doesn't tell you what to teach at all. It's really similar to what we've always been using. But it does give you an idea of the expectations from start to finish and where we want them at a minimum and what is proficient by the time they get done. It's focused. It's extremely focused. Rigorous content, application, knowledge through higher order skills. You'll see these themes come back. One of the documents that was consulted heavily during the development of all these Common Core practices was Bloom's revised taxonomy. You will find the terminology that we just looked at everywhere in Common Core. Analyze, understand, create, evaluate, all of those terms and all of the little verbs that go along with them in that lovely orange that we saw are throughout the Common Core because it was used as a guiding document. International benchmarks based on research, obviously, or we wouldn't be using it, right? This is just saying, yes, of course we want every kid to know this stuff, right? That just makes sense. Why is it important? Design, aligned with the best evidence on college and career readiness expectations. Obviously, that's as of 2009. Will things change in the next 4 years? Yeah. Okay. So is this going to be permanently in place with this text? No. This has got to be a living document. But this is the best we can do right now. This is what we've got. This is what our kids right now, going into college and into careers at that age, need to know. Okay. These are just some key advances in every area as far as what we really feel has been improved over what we've seen. And it's not like a state-by-state improvement. This doesn't say that Wyoming was deficient in one of these areas. This is just that overall, this is what's being improved and what they're really focused on. For reading, writing, speaking, and language, we'll look at this a little more in depth in a moment. We also start to get standards for reading and writing in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. Science isn't just make sure you know these facts. Science is now you have to be able to write about it as well. The writing and reading piece, the literacy piece, is huge, which is great. And so we've also got more alignment with college and career readiness for history, social studies, and science. And we also get, in math, I love the comment, level is ambitious, but achievable. So basically we're saying we've been doing okay in the reading and writing piece, across the country, but on the math side, we're not super strong. And that's not Wyoming, that's just nationally, we're not super strong. So this is comparing our own standards, our own levels of achievement, and some of the others across the world, and saying, well, this is really where we should be. It's aggressive, but we can do it. I like this part. This is my favorite part of the whole Common Core little presentation here. This is what we don't do with them. Okay? They don't tell you how to teach. They don't tell you what to teach. They don't tell you what to teach beyond the core. You've got kids that are flying above. It doesn't tell you, well, then you need to move them to the next level. No. You've got kids that are flying and they're advanced or whatever. Great. You decide what's best for the kids, right? Okay. Interventions. It does not tell you what to do with kids who need those interventions. Okay. What we need to do through special services or title or resource room or any of those things, that is left up to every individual school, district, however they want to handle it. Our goal is to get those kids proficient. Anything below that, get them there. Do whatever you got to do. There's nothing to guide you on that. Full range of support for English language learners. Same sort of thing, right? Do what you got to do. And it doesn't tell you everything you need to become college ready, right? There are social skills that we cannot teach with Common Core. There are things like etiquette and digital citizenship that are not built into Common Core. You can build them in, because it doesn't tell you what to teach. You can put them in there, but it doesn't tell you that we should all sit down with our exiting high school seniors and say, look, here's what you can't put on Facebook. And I know your email says hotstud82@aol.com, but that's probably not the one you want to use when you apply for jobs. You know? We should have those conversations, but it's not written to the core. I've had, as a music instructor, I've had several that say trumpet stud. There have been a few along those lines, you know. Squeaky high note, hot, whatever. Yeah, they're creative sometimes. This is what the standards promise us. They're not intended to be new names for old ways. They're called to take the next step. Time for states to work together. Time to recognize that standards are not just promises for our children, but promises we intend to keep. So it's not just revising, it's creating a new process. So that's the goal behind the Common Core standards. That's roughly in a nutshell what they say about themselves. And since Wyoming has adopted them, right? June 16, 2010, Wyoming said, we're in. Okay? We have a few years until we have to actually have that implemented. Actually, officially, I think it's in there as of this year, 2012, right? I think officially it's this year, and then next year is when we start actually using these as some of our assessment standards in the K-12 curriculum. But yeah, as of 2010. In fact, we weren't one of the last, which might surprise you. There were lots after us. In fact, there's still 4 or 5 holdouts that absolutely refuse, including Texas, surprise, surprise. I think Minnesota. But we're in. We're in 100%. We agree with this. Okay. The lovely thing is, it doesn't tell you what to teach, doesn't tell you how to teach. You guys know what your kids need. So these are really tiny print, so I'm not going to bother getting too detailed in. The top page is a page from the actual Common Core document. If you've never printed it out and read it, don't do it before bed. It won't keep you awake. But that's just a page. It shows you 2 different grade strands. This one, this is grades 9 through 10. For speaking and listening, here are the things we're going to assess. Grades 11 and 12, speaking and listening. What Wyoming has done is taken those and basically rewritten them into their own content standards to reflect. Really, we were pretty close on a lot of these already. But this is now what, as of this year, our grade 12 basic speaking and listening skills are. Student initiates and participates effectively in a range of collaborative discussions with diverse partners. Topics, texts, and issues, builds on others' information to express his or her own ideas very persuasively. It also gives you these ideas. Student comes to discussions prepared to do these things. Work with peers. Propel conversations by posing and responding to questions. Respond thoughtfully to diverse perspectives. Integrate multiple sources, including media. That's an expectation by grade 12, right? Evaluate a speaker's point of view. There's an evaluate piece. So you'll see a lot of the terms that we've seen with Bloom's revised, right? We know we've got a digital taxonomy tool now that kind of matches up some of those things. We're not far off from being able to go through these standards and go, aha, I can do this. I can come up, I mean, you guys are teachers. You know what they need to know. You know what the task is going to be. We can start getting to the point where we can start supplementing in those digital tools. And what we end up finding is when you do that, you end up with project-based learning pretty much the whole time because they're doing projects. And that's kind of the way things end up. So that's grade 12. Here's one of the younger ones. This is writing standards K5. Oh, go back. Sorry, our tree is swinging here. a lot of it there, a lot more detail here. By grade 12, they're doing a lot of higher order, evaluate, create, discuss, debate, right? K5, we're very specific on some things. With guidance and support from adults, the student uses technology to publish writing and collaborate with others. At grade 4. Grades 1 and 2 have the same thing. Grades 1 and 2, with support from an adult or a teacher, should write and publish writing in an environment that can be viewed either online or by peers. Okay? That's awesome. I love that. This today's meet thing, which I'm forgetting to check all the time, in case anybody's actually saying anything. There we go. Oh, that's because I'm on the guest network. Oh, there we go. I use the today's meet piece with 3rd through 5th graders. I could use it younger, it's just that then I'd have to go around and tell them how to spell every word. You know? I love the idea of doing it with younger kids, and if they've written something in class, absolutely, there are tools they can come in. If they've written it down and we're doing some digital story stuff, they can type that in. Now, we start keyboarding a little bit, keyboard familiarity we call it, not really keyboarding, keyboard familiarity in 1st grade at Vital Elementary. I don't want them typing 60 words a minute. I want them to know where the stupid period is, so when I say .com, they don't sit there for 10 minutes going, where's the dot? Because that's exactly what happens. Okay, so we do keyboard familiarity to where they know where the important things are, so when we do these sorts of activities, not an issue. I can tell you by 2nd and 3rd grade, they're good. You know, open a browser, click in the address bar, type this address, and it's right up on the screen. They're good. They've had that training. If you don't do that, and you have them in 4th and 5th grade, you give them the same command, what? I don't get it. You know, they're all over the place. Okay. But the expectations of Common Core are there. 1st, 2nd grade on up. Write and publish in that sort of environment. So, as far as actually matching up tools to these sorts of things, that's a really, really quick overview of Common Core. And before I actually even go into the examples here where we're pairing up tools and projects, questions, comments, thoughts? There's got to be something. No? Okay. At some point I'll just call on the people I know and make them talk. So beware. All right, whoa, that's way too small. Let's do this. So here's an example. I pulled up a couple of lesson plans just out there on the web, Lesson Planet, in case you're interested, for specific skills where they've actually gone through and assigned Common Core assessments. Okay, so they've picked up Common Core and have gone ahead and said, well, this is actually going to satisfy this, and this is what you're going to see. So here's our first one we're going to look at, and then we're going to go through and see if in that description you can tease out key phrases, key elements, key thoughts. How would you support that with a digital tool? Because you won't have to. I mean, I can teach, you know, Johnny Appleseed and never leave the comfort of a print book and a piece of paper and some crayons. But my kids are going to get a lot more out of it if I let them play with something like this. You know, and I know that because I've seen them do it. So this lesson plan right here, called Appalicious, kindergarten through 2nd grade, is roughly their area. Focus question, this is all philanthropy based, which is wonderful. It's not something I have time to do in library all the time, but I can see myself doing pieces of this. So the focus question is, how was the work of Johnny Appleseed an example of philanthropy, and what can we do for the common good? That's pretty heavy for K2, right? But the activities that go on, as a one-shot, this is never going to work, right? But as a unit plan, this is a really cool idea. So as we go through the lesson, it's got you doing things like the learner will stamp apple shapes on paper and make invitations. The whole point of this particular lesson is once you've learned about Johnny Appleseed, you're going to make applesauce. You're going to recite some poems, you're going to learn some things about Johnny Appleseed, and then you're going to invite another class to come into the classroom. You're going to share with them what you learned, you're going to do your recitation of your poetry, you're going to share your applesauce with them, and you're going to talk about what it means to share, and to be a good person, and to give without asking for things in return. Which, at this age level, that's perfect. We need that. We need that sharing piece. We need that be good to people piece, right? So this is awesome. When you read through all of the, service experience, all that stuff, you say, wow, that's a lot. That's really heavy. But it doesn't need to be. So we're going to make invitations. We're going to make applesauce. Then in a performance, read and recite what that student has learned. And then draw a picture showing how they felt when they shared with another class. None of that requires any technology whatsoever. And in a classroom environment, if you don't have access to it, you can teach this same lesson. What? I'm going to pop through. this is the rest of the plan. It's like 4 pages long. It's fabulous, but it's a lot. Okay. Here are the standards. Here are the Common Core standards that are actually being met or satisfied as we go. And I'm sure read from here, so it's a little easier to read. So we've got, if we're talking about grade 1, retell stories, including key details that demonstrate understanding of their central message. So part of this is knowing enough about Johnny Appleseed and having learned the story well enough to retell it. Can you think of any digital tools that would allow you to retell the story of Johnny Appleseed? I can think of a bunch. I can think of using My Story, the app where you write your own story. You can retell it. I mean, you could even, if you didn't have time to do it, if you don't have enough iPads or you don't have enough computers, you can have all of the kids draw their own pictures at different parts of the story, and then you take a picture of each one, and you put all of that together in a PowerPoint, and then you just show the story because each student has contributed. And you get the collaboration piece in there too at the same time. It's a win-win. You know, but that retelling piece, there's so many tools we can see for that. We get, with guidance and support from adults, focus on a topic, respond to questions, and add details to strengthen writing. Anytime it says writing, all you got to do is move it from pencil and paper onto a screen, and the kids are going to be all about it. It's going to take them longer. They're going to have to think about it more, right? Because this isn't going to happen real fast. And I think it's something like the average adult human writes at like 25 words a minute. If you type less than that, it's faster to write it by hand. Our kids don't type 25 words a minute. It doesn't happen, right? But any of these pieces could work. So, as I'm going through a lesson like this, here's 4 things I kind of teased out as I've gone through. Retell the story of Johnny Appleseed. Okay? I'm not just thinking about the tools. I'm thinking about where they fall in blues, where they fall in that taxonomy. If I have to retell something, I have to understand it. That opens up a whole thing. Yeah, I can think of a couple tools here and there, but depending on where I am, what teacher I'm working with, what resources I have, like I said, there are times during the year where I have no computers to use. I've got a few iPads, okay? Maybe, if I'm lucky, unless they're checked out, in which case, what am I going to do? So I have to be flexible with the tools that I'm using. So I'm worried less about the individual tool. I'm worried more about where it sits, the level of blues, okay? Understanding. Now I go to that digital taxonomy, or I go to one of those websites as a guide. We'll look at a couple of those in a second. And I'll sort through it. What's going to work for me on this one? What level of student am I dealing with? Can they handle something like My Story? Or do we need to go really simple, right? Or if they're older, more complex. They need to be able to follow directions to make applesauce. That's applying skill right there. Now, do they need a tech tool to help them make applesauce? Absolutely not. What they're going to need is a lot of napkins. They're going to need a lot of cleanup. Because that's just what's going to happen. But if you want to reinforce this piece, what are we doing when we follow directions in the K-5 world or the younger kid world? Same thing we're doing with the older kids. We're sequencing. We're following steps. If you want to focus on that, we could tie Johnny Appleseed to math real fast. Not only for counting apples, but for sequencing steps. So there are apps that will let us practice sequencing. And that could be a piece of this. It's not just making applesauce, but what steps do I need? And then they go back and they have to mind map exactly what sequence they had to do things in. And they've got to go mind map at the same time. Okay? Perform poem or recitation from memory. Okay? So part of this lesson plan is tell the kids to go practice their lines from the story over and over again until they can do it correctly. Okay? That works real well for some kids, especially the ones that can sit there and read it and catch themselves. There are kids for whom that will not work. If you send Johnny over to the corner to go practice his lines, Johnny's going to be pulling books off the shelf, drawing on things, and playing with his buddies. Okay? So I might want something to keep them a little more engaged. So let's say I've got a tool, whether it's a tape recorder or an iPad or a computer, and I say, here, I want you to practice this until you like how it sounds. Here's what you need to say. Here's a little app called Quick Voice. I want you to press record, and I want you to recite your line, press stop, and listen to it. See if you like it. Okay? Come back to me when you have it perfect. They will do it over and over. We use this in literacy a lot with our younger kids, especially for fluency, right? Because when a teacher tells you, oh, it sounds really, it doesn't sound right yet. You know, you're reading it, it sounds really stilted, and it doesn't flow, and things are being mispronounced. The kid's reaction is, whatever. You're telling me that. I think I read fine. If you press record, they hear their own voice coming back at them. You don't get that. You get, oh, and then they practice a lot, right? So I could see this performing for memory, it's applying a skill, it's practicing recitation, but it's also creating. You can get really crazy with that one. Performing, recitation from memory. Let's say you don't want to do it during the sharing. You don't want kids getting up with their applesauce all in their mouths and then reciting something and sitting back down, doing that sort of thing. So you just have them record it. You do an actual narration of the story. That becomes creative. So you've got both of those levels as a possibility. And finally, at the very end, what they say at the end of this lesson is assess the value to the students by having them discuss it and draw a picture. Great. What are you going to do with that? They had a discussion, that's good, they got something, and you can sit down and go, well, 5 of them had a good time, 6 of them was like, it's okay, 3 of them weren't paying attention and didn't get it. Okay. Or you can think about it as an evaluation piece, and you look at ways of using this particular element of it as an assessment tool. If you're having them do drawings, just have them do a drawing and then hand it in. Have them do a drawing, snap a picture, and then have them narrate something about how it makes them feel. And then keep it in your little digital portfolio of all those pictures so that you can share back with the other class, look how you affected them. You shared with them, but look how it affected them. All these different ways of assessing this. And when we go back and look at the Common Core standards that we're supposed to hit, when we look at them from this perspective, we've hit them all, and then some. Again, it doesn't tell you what you have to teach beyond the core, right? So if we just hit all those things, and they got a whole bunch of technology into it at the same time, fabulous. One other, let's see, we're running short on time. One other quick example, similar sort of thing, and then I want to show you a couple of tools. Besides just knowing the digital taxonomy and going through and kind of finding lists and trying to match things up, there's a couple other really useful tools out there. This is an example of a lesson. This is, I think this is folklore, European folk tales is what it is. And this is actually set at like an 11th or 12th grade level. Close your eyes real fast and we can bounce through it, and I hate Chrissy when it does this. There we go. All right. So go through this whole lesson. Here's what it's expecting you to do. Analyze literary characters. Well, analysis, that makes that one real easy. Syllabus right there. Compare characters' determination. A little harder, but still falls under analyzing, right? We're comparing things. Rewrite the conclusion of a folk tale. I love this part of the assignment. I love doing things like stapled stories, where you take the last chapter of a book and just staple it together and you hand it out and go, when you get to the last chapter, make up your own ending. And you don't let them see the end of it until after they've already written their own. So rewrite the conclusion of a folk tale. This is 2 different things. This is both applying a skill because they have to remember the story, they have to understand the story, and then they have to actually apply writing skills. And then they're creating something new. So really it falls in that whole range right there. And you can see how, yeah, technically it's there. You don't have to start at the bottom of the remember. You can just say, rewrite the end of a folk tale. The kids will know. They're going to have to read it first. You don't have to start with, let's all read it together. No, you're going to rewrite the end of it. Pick one. Okay? And then my personal favorite, debate the best dowry. That one's one that comes up in this particular lesson plan. And really, that's an evaluation process. You have to know multiple types of dowries, and then you have to analyze them, and then you have to debate them, and so you have to evaluate on your own what sort of dowry is going to be the best. All of these are things that can be done and be assisted by technology tools in the classroom if you really want to keep them engaged. And we looked at some of them. The evaluation piece, yeah, they could stand up there and they could have a debate. You could have 4 people. You could do it as a play, or you could have them blog about it. You could have them comment on it. You could have different examples sort of, kind of like what we were seeing upstairs, where you draw on lots of different types of media and you compare them, and then you do a poll, everywhere poll, and then you have the kids pick which one they think is the best. So yeah, you can debate it. Then you can have a vote on it. We just did a 5th grade presidential bracket at Vital Elementary because they're learning all about the voting process and electoral college and all those sorts of fun things. At the same time, in my classroom and library, we're trying to talk about biographies. So rather than going for current presidentials and getting into debates in my classroom, which I don't want, we go, let's talk about dead guys. Okay? So you can only pick a dead guy.